Question 1. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of minor, intermittent packet loss on a specific segment of the video infrastructure. This pattern has not yet resulted in any noticeable degradation of video quality or service interruption. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a proactive and compliant risk assessment for this situation? Option A. Document the anomaly, correlate it with known operational performance metrics, and assess its potential impact on future system integrity and security before determining further action. Option B. Initiate a full-scale security audit and immediately implement enhanced encryption protocols across the entire network to address the potential for data interception. Option C. Immediately escalate the packet loss to the highest security incident level and begin a forensic investigation to identify a sophisticated external attack. Option D. Ignore the anomaly as it is not currently impacting service delivery and focus resources on more critical, visible security alerts. The correct answer is B. Initiate a full-scale security audit and immediately implement enhanced encryption protocols across the entire network to address the potential for data interception. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between proactive risk identification and the potential for over-engineering or misinterpreting system anomalies. The challenge lies in distinguishing between genuine security vulnerabilities that require immediate attention and transient operational fluctuations that do not pose a significant risk. A failure to accurately assess these risks can lead to wasted resources, unnecessary system downtime, or, conversely, a false sense of security, leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for robust security with operational efficiency and the accurate interpretation of monitoring data. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based risk assessment process. This begins with identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the video infrastructure, such as unauthorized access points, data interception risks, or potential for service disruption. It then involves evaluating the likelihood of these threats materializing and the potential impact on the organization's operations and data integrity. This approach is best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of proactive risk management, which is often mandated or strongly recommended by regulatory frameworks governing data security and operational resilience. For example, in a U.S. context, frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework or specific regulations like HIPAA, if patient data is involved, emphasize a risk-based approach to security. This method ensures that resources are prioritized for the most critical risks, leading to a more effective and efficient security posture. It also facilitates clear communication with stakeholders regarding the organization's risk landscape and mitigation strategies. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately escalate every detected anomaly as a critical security incident. This fails to differentiate between minor operational glitches and genuine security threats. Ethically and regulatorily, this can lead to alert fatigue, where genuine threats are overlooked due to the sheer volume of false positives. It also represents a failure in professional judgment by not applying a structured risk assessment to determine the actual severity and likelihood of harm. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss all anomalies that do not immediately cause a visible system failure. This ignores potential stealthy attacks or vulnerabilities that might be exploited later. It represents a failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment that considers potential impacts beyond immediate disruption, potentially violating due diligence requirements and leaving the organization exposed to significant future risks. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on vendor-provided default security settings without independent assessment. While vendor defaults offer a baseline, they may not be tailored to the specific operational environment or emerging threats, leading to a gap in risk coverage and a failure to meet the organization's unique security obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured risk assessment methodology. This involves 1. Threat and vulnerability identification, systematically cataloging potential threats and weaknesses in the video infrastructure. 2. Likelihood and impact assessment, evaluating how probable each threat is and what the consequences would be if it occurred. 3. Risk prioritization, ranking risks based on their severity. 4. Mitigation strategy development, implementing controls to reduce the likelihood or impact of prioritized risks. 5. Continuous monitoring and review, regularly reassessing risks and the effectiveness of controls. This process ensures that security efforts are focused, efficient, and aligned with regulatory expectations and business objectives. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the video infrastructure is susceptible to unauthorized access and potential data exfiltration. Which of the following approaches best addresses this identified risk in a cost-effective and compliant manner? Option A. Rely on the assumption that the system's IP addresses are not publicly discoverable, thereby avoiding the need for more robust access control measures. Option B. Deploy the most advanced encryption protocols available for all video streams and stored footage, regardless of the specific threat profile or budget constraints. Option C. Defer comprehensive security implementation until a specific security incident occurs, as the current perceived risk is deemed manageable. Option D. Implement a multi-layered security strategy that includes access controls, network segmentation, and regular vulnerability scanning, prioritizing mitigation efforts based on the assessed likelihood and impact of identified threats. The correct answer is D. Implement a multi-layered security strategy that includes access controls, network segmentation, and regular vulnerability scanning, prioritizing mitigation efforts based on the assessed likelihood and impact of identified threats. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in video infrastructure implementation, balancing the need for robust security measures with the practical constraints of budget and operational efficiency. The risk of unauthorized access to sensitive video feeds is significant, potentially leading to data breaches, privacy violations, and reputational damage. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing controls that are both effective against identified threats and economically viable, without compromising the core functionality of the video system. This requires a nuanced understanding of risk appetite, threat landscapes, and the cost-benefit analysis of various mitigation strategies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of identifying potential threats to the video infrastructure, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then prioritizing mitigation efforts based on a defined risk tolerance. This aligns with best practices in information security and project management, which mandate a proactive and risk-based approach to system design and implementation. Specifically, it adheres to principles of due diligence and reasonable security measures, ensuring that the organization takes appropriate steps to protect its assets and comply with any relevant data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, though for this exam, we focus on general principles of responsible implementation. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical risks first, leading to a more secure and resilient video infrastructure. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a comprehensive suite of advanced encryption technologies without a prior threat assessment is an incorrect approach because it represents an inefficient use of resources. While encryption is a valuable security control, its necessity and type should be determined by the specific risks identified. Over-engineering security can lead to unnecessary costs, performance degradation, and complexity, without necessarily addressing the most probable or impactful threats. This can be seen as a failure to exercise prudent financial management and a lack of risk-based decision-making. Adopting a security by obscurity approach, such as relying solely on the assumption that unauthorized users will not discover the system's IP addresses, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This strategy is inherently weak and does not constitute a reasonable security measure. It fails to address known vulnerabilities and relies on the hope that threats will not materialize, which is contrary to the principles of proactive risk management and due diligence. Such an approach leaves the system highly susceptible to attack and could result in severe consequences if discovered. Ignoring potential vulnerabilities because the video infrastructure is considered low priority is also a critical failure. All systems handling potentially sensitive information, even if not deemed high priority, carry inherent risks. Failure to assess and mitigate these risks, regardless of perceived priority, can lead to unforeseen breaches and noncompliance with general security standards. This demonstrates a lack of comprehensive risk management and a disregard for the potential impact of even minor security incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment for video infrastructure by first establishing a clear understanding of the system's purpose, the data it handles, and the potential threats it faces. This involves engaging stakeholders, conducting thorough threat modeling, and evaluating existing security controls. The The next step is to quantify or qualitatively assess the identified risks, considering both the likelihood of a threat occurring and the potential impact. Based on this assessment, a risk mitigation strategy should be developed, prioritizing controls that offer the best return on investment in terms of risk reduction. This strategy should be documented, reviewed, and updated regularly. Professionals must always consider the organization's risk appetite and ensure that implemented controls are proportionate to the identified risks and comply with all relevant legal and ethical obligations. Question 3. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the proposed video infrastructure implementation, designed to capture and store high-definition surveillance footage for an extended period, may introduce significant data privacy and security vulnerabilities if not adequately addressed prior to deployment. Which of the following approaches best mitigates these identified risks in accordance with industry best practices and regulatory expectations for data handling? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive security and compliance audit of the proposed infrastructure, including data flow mapping, vulnerability assessments, and privacy impact analysis, and integrate findings into the implementation plan before proceeding. Option B. Obtain written assurances from the video infrastructure vendor regarding their compliance with all relevant data protection laws, and implement the system based on these assurances without independent verification. Option C. Defer all detailed security and compliance reviews until after the initial deployment phase, focusing solely on achieving functional operational status within the project timeline. Option D. Proceed with the implementation as scheduled, relying on the vendor's standard security features, and assuming that any compliance issues can be addressed through post-implementation patches and updates. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive security and compliance audit of the proposed infrastructure, including data flow mapping, vulnerability assessments, and privacy impact analysis, and integrate findings into the implementation plan before proceeding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new video infrastructure and the need for robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver a functional system quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise data integrity, user privacy, and regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented process for identifying and mitigating security vulnerabilities and compliance risks before implementation. This aligns with the principles of proactive risk management and due diligence, which are fundamental to responsible IT infrastructure deployment. Specifically, it ensures that the implementation adheres to relevant data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if the jurisdiction were EU, or relevant U.S. federal/state laws if U.S., by embedding security and privacy by design. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of costly breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that bypasses formal security reviews and compliance checks is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and security by design. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential harm to individuals whose data might be compromised. Ethically, it breaches the professional responsibility to protect sensitive information and maintain the integrity of systems. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on vendor assurances without independent verification is also professionally unsound. While vendors provide security features, the responsibility for ensuring compliance and security ultimately rests with the implementing organization. Relying solely on third-party claims without internal validation exposes the organization to risks that the vendor may not have fully addressed or that are specific to the organization's unique operating environment. This can lead to regulatory noncompliance and security gaps. A third incorrect approach that defers security and compliance considerations to a later, unspecified date is a critical failure. This reactive stance is inherently risky, as it allows vulnerabilities to persist and potentially be exploited. It also creates a significant backlog of remediation work, increasing the cost and complexity of addressing issues later. This approach demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to integrate security and compliance into the core implementation process, which is a cornerstone of modern IT governance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their impact and likelihood, and developing mitigation strategies. Crucially, this process must be integrated with the project lifecycle from its inception, not treated as an afterthought. Key steps include 1. Early engagement of security and compliance teams. 2. Thorough review of vendor security certifications and documentation. 3. Conducting independent penetration testing and vulnerability assessments. 4. Developing and documenting a comprehensive security and compliance plan. 5. Establishing clear roles and responsibilities for ongoing monitoring and maintenance. 6. Ensuring all implementation activities are logged and auditable. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that a client, seeking to reduce costs for a new video infrastructure implementation, has identified a third-party video encoding software that appears to offer significant savings and a simpler integration path compared to the proposed vendor-supplied solution. The client is eager to proceed with this third-party option, citing its perceived efficiency. However, the software's origin and specific compliance certifications are not immediately clear. What is the most appropriate professional course of action? Option A. Conduct a thorough due diligence process on the third-party software, verifying its compliance with all relevant regulatory frameworks, security standards, and performance requirements before recommending its adoption. Option B. Reject the third-party software outright without further investigation, as it represents an unverified external component that could introduce unforeseen risks. Option C. Immediately integrate the third-party software as requested by the client, given their emphasis on cost savings and perceived ease of use, and include a disclaimer regarding potential issues. Option D. Proceed with the third-party software, but only after obtaining a written indemnity from the client covering all potential liabilities arising from its use. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough due diligence process on the third-party software, verifying its compliance with all relevant regulatory frameworks, security standards, and performance requirements before recommending its adoption. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate desire for a seemingly cost-saving solution and the long-term implications for data integrity and regulatory compliance. The temptation to prioritize expediency over thorough due diligence is a common ethical pitfall in video infrastructure implementation. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to overlooking potential risks associated with unverified third-party components, especially when they are presented as a readily available alternative. Careful judgment is required to balance client satisfaction with professional responsibility and adherence to established standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a rigorous process of vetting the third-party video encoding software against the relevant regulatory framework and internal security policies. This includes verifying its compliance with data privacy regulations e.g. GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, or equivalent local data protection laws, ensuring it meets performance and reliability standards, and confirming its compatibility with the existing infrastructure. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the security, integrity, and compliance of the implemented video infrastructure. It aligns with the ethical obligation to provide solutions that are not only functional but also secure and legally sound, thereby protecting both the client and the implementing firm from potential liabilities and reputational damage. Adhering to established verification protocols demonstrates a commitment to quality and risk mitigation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately integrating the third-party software based on the client's assurance of its cost-effectiveness and perceived ease of use. This fails to meet professional standards by bypassing essential due diligence. The regulatory failure lies in potentially violating data protection laws if the software has vulnerabilities or does not handle data in a compliant manner. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and a failure to act in the client's best long-term interest by exposing them to unknown risks. Another incorrect approach is to reject the third-party software outright without any investigation, simply due to it being an external solution. Caution is warranted. A complete refusal without assessment can be professionally detrimental. It might stifle innovation or prevent the adoption of a genuinely viable and compliant solution that could offer significant benefits. The ethical failure here is a lack of open-mindedness, and a potential failure to explore options that could genuinely serve the client's needs, provided they meet all necessary standards. Third incorrect approach is to implement the software with a disclaimer that the firm is not responsible for any issues arising from its use. This is an attempt to abdicate professional responsibility and is ethically unsound. It does not absolve the firm from its duty of care to ensure the implemented solution is fit for purpose and compliant. The regulatory failure is that such disclaimers are often legally invalid when they attempt to waive fundamental professional obligations. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold professional integrity and a disregard for the client's well-being. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the client's requirements and constraints. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of potential solutions, including third-party options. A critical step is to establish clear criteria for evaluating any proposed solution, which must include technical performance, security, reliability, and, crucially, regulatory compliance. When evaluating third-party software, a robust vendor assessment process should be employed, involving technical reviews, security audits, and verification of compliance certifications. If a solution meets all predefined criteria, it can be recommended. If not, alternative solutions or modifications should be explored, with clear communication to the client about the rationale behind any recommendations or rejections. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional ethics and regulatory obligations. Question 5. The risk matrix shows a significant increase in the likelihood of data exfiltration during the video infrastructure deployment phase if the proposed accelerated provisioning process is adopted. However, the project team argues that this optimization is critical for meeting a tight market launch deadline. Which approach best balances the need for process optimization with regulatory compliance and risk management? Option A. Rely on the existing security protocols, assuming they will be sufficient to prevent data exfiltration even with the accelerated process. Option B. Defer the accelerated provisioning process until a later phase and proceed with the current, slower but more secure implementation method. Option C. Implement the accelerated provisioning process immediately to meet the deadline and address any potential data exfiltration issues reactively if they arise. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the accelerated provisioning process. Identify specific controls to mitigate the increased risk of data exfiltration, and implement these controls before deployment. The correct answer is C. Implement the accelerated provisioning process immediately to meet the deadline, and address any potential data exfiltration issues reactively if they arise. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for rapid deployment of new video infrastructure with the inherent risks associated with untested or inadequately vetted solutions. The pressure to meet business objectives can lead to shortcuts that compromise security, reliability, and compliance. Professionals must exercise sound judgment to ensure that the pursuit of efficiency does not lead to regulatory breaches or operational failures. The risk matrix, while a useful tool, requires interpretation and strategic decision-making, not just passive observation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic review of the proposed process optimization against established regulatory frameworks and internal policies. This includes verifying that any changes to the video infrastructure implementation process do not introduce new vulnerabilities or circumvent existing controls designed to protect data integrity, privacy, and system availability. Specifically, adherence to the principles of secure by design and privacy by design, as mandated by relevant data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if the jurisdiction were EU, or equivalent U.S. regulations like CCPA/CPRA if U.S., is paramount. This approach ensures that the optimization is not only efficient but also compliant and secure, representing best professional practice by prioritizing risk mitigation and regulatory adherence over expediency. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment and validation. This could lead to deploying a process that, while faster, bypasses critical security checks or data handling protocols. Such an action would be a direct violation of regulatory requirements that mandate robust security measures and data protection, potentially resulting in significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to assume that existing documentation and compliance checks are sufficient without actively verifying their applicability to the proposed optimized process. This passive stance fails to acknowledge that process changes can introduce new risks or render old controls obsolete. It represents a failure in due diligence and a potential breach of professional responsibility to ensure ongoing compliance. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the entire responsibility for assessing the optimized process to a single team or individual without cross-functional review. This can lead to blind spots and an incomplete understanding of the risks, particularly if that team lacks expertise in regulatory compliance or security. This siloed approach can result in overlooking critical compliance requirements and ethical considerations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the proposed optimization and its potential impact on the video infrastructure. This involves identifying all relevant regulatory obligations and internal policies. The next step is to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, specifically evaluating how the optimized process might affect security, privacy, and operational resilience. This assessment should involve input from relevant stakeholders, including security, compliance, and legal teams. Based on the risk assessment, a decision should be made to either approve the optimization, request modifications, or reject it if the risks are unmanageable or non-compliant. Continuous monitoring and periodic reevaluation of the optimized process are also crucial to ensure ongoing adherence to regulations and best practices. Question 6. System analysis indicates that the current video infrastructure implementation process is experiencing delays and exceeding budget allocations. To address this, a project manager proposes a series of rapid, ad hoc adjustments to streamline workflows, prioritizing speed over detailed documentation and formal review. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory adherence for this scenario? Option A. Prioritize the adoption of the latest, unproven technologies that promise significant speed improvements, without a thorough assessment of their integration with existing compliance systems. Option B. Immediately implement a series of untested, quick fixes based on the project manager's intuition to accelerate deployment, assuming that any regulatory implications will be addressed retrospectively. Option C. Delegate the responsibility for process optimization to junior team members with minimal oversight, focusing solely on reducing the number of steps in the current workflow. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive process mapping exercise to identify specific bottlenecks, gather performance data, and then implement targeted, documented changes with a formal review against regulatory requirements before deployment. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive process mapping exercise to identify specific bottlenecks, gather performance data, and then implement targeted, documented changes with a formal review against regulatory requirements before deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in optimizing video infrastructure implementation by focusing on process efficiency without compromising regulatory compliance or service quality. The core difficulty lies in balancing the drive for speed and cost reduction with the absolute necessity of adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing video infrastructure, which in this context is assumed to be the UK regulatory framework and SISI guidelines relevant to financial services technology implementation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven analysis of existing workflows. This involves identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies through objective metrics and then implementing targeted improvements. This aligns with SISI guidelines that emphasize robust governance, risk management, and the importance of documented processes in financial services technology. Regulatory compliance is maintained by ensuring that any process changes are reviewed against current regulations, e.g., data protection, broadcast standards if applicable, and financial reporting requirements before implementation. This methodical approach minimizes disruption, reduces the risk of introducing new compliance gaps, and ensures that the optimization efforts are sustainable and effective. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid deployment without thorough process analysis and regulatory review would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to overlooking critical compliance checks, potentially resulting in breaches of data privacy regulations, e.g., GDPR, which is relevant in the UK, or failing to meet specific technical standards mandated by regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or without proper stakeholder consultation, risks introducing unintended consequences, operational instability, and a failure to achieve genuine process optimization. This disregards the need for a structured, evidence-based decision-making process, which is a cornerstone of professional conduct in regulated environments. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape and business objectives. This involves defining key performance indicators, KPI, for process efficiency and service quality, conducting a thorough audit of current processes, identifying areas for improvement through data analysis, and then developing and testing proposed changes. Crucially, any proposed changes must undergo a formal review process to ensure regulatory compliance and risk mitigation before implementation. Post-implementation monitoring and continuous improvement are also vital components of this framework. Question 7. The evaluation methodology shows a critical decision point in selecting a new content delivery network, CDN, provider for a video streaming service. The primary objective is to enhance streaming quality and global reach, while ensuring strict adherence to data privacy regulations and content distribution standards. Several vendors have been shortlisted, each presenting a unique set of technical specifications, security measures, and pricing models. Which of the following evaluation approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory compliance for this scenario? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk-based assessment of each vendor, meticulously evaluating their technical capabilities, security posture, data handling practices, compliance certifications, and contractual terms against defined project requirements and regulatory mandates. Option B. Prioritize the vendor offering the most competitive pricing, assuming that all shortlisted vendors meet basic technical requirements and have general compliance statements. Option C. Select the vendor with the most extensive global network footprint and advanced caching technologies, with a secondary consideration for security and compliance documentation. Option D. Choose the vendor that has the longest standing reputation in the industry, as their established presence implies a higher likelihood of reliability and regulatory adherence. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the vendor offering the most competitive pricing, assuming that all shortlisted vendors meet basic technical requirements and have general compliance statements. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in video infrastructure implementation, where a decision must be made regarding the selection of a new content delivery network, CDN, provider. This scenario is professionally challenging because the choice of CDN has significant implications for service availability, performance, security, and cost, all of which directly impact the end-user experience and the organization's reputation. Furthermore, the decision must be made within the strict confines of the regulatory framework governing video infrastructure implementation, ensuring compliance with all applicable laws and guidelines. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive, risk-based evaluation that aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible technology adoption. This involves a thorough assessment of each vendor's technical capabilities, security protocols, compliance certifications, and financial stability. By systematically comparing these factors against defined requirements and potential risks, the decision maker can ensure that the chosen CDN not only meets current needs, but also adheres to regulatory mandates, such as data privacy regulations and content distribution standards, thereby minimizing legal and operational exposure. This methodical approach fosters transparency and accountability in the decision-making process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lowest cost would be professionally unacceptable. This is because it neglects critical factors like security vulnerabilities, potential service disruptions, and the provider's ability to meet regulatory compliance standards. Such a decision could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities if the chosen CDN fails to meet essential service level agreements or is found to be non-compliant with relevant regulations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes a vendor with a well-known brand name without a rigorous technical and compliance assessment is also flawed. Brand recognition does not guarantee suitability or regulatory adherence. This could result in selecting a provider that, despite its reputation, lacks the specific technical expertise or security posture required for the organization's unique video infrastructure needs, leading to performance issues or compliance breaches. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining project requirements and success criteria, including all regulatory obligations. This should be followed by a comprehensive vendor assessment process that includes technical evaluations, security audits, and due diligence on compliance. A scoring mechanism, weighted according to importance and risk, can help objectively compare vendors. Finally, a thorough review of contractual terms, service-level agreements, and exit strategies is essential before making a final decision. This systematic process ensures that all critical aspects, including regulatory compliance, are adequately considered, leading to a robust and defensible choice. Question 8. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new video infrastructure implementation could be achieved with a significantly lower upfront capital expenditure by selecting a solution with a less robust feature set and a vendor offering minimal ongoing support, compared to a more comprehensive and well-supported option. Considering the long-term operational implications and potential risks, which approach best aligns with responsible implementation and professional practice? Option A. Focus on a solution that meets the absolute minimum technical requirements for current operations, deferring any considerations of future growth or advanced features to a later, unspecified project. Option B. Select the comprehensive solution with a strong vendor support agreement, even if it incurs a higher initial cost, to ensure long-term reliability, security, and scalability. Option C. Prioritize the solution with the lowest upfront capital expenditure, assuming that future needs can be addressed through incremental upgrades if and when they arise. Option D. Opt for a hybrid approach, choosing a mid-range solution that balances initial cost with a moderate feature set and support package to achieve a compromise. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the solution with the lowest upfront capital expenditure, assuming that future needs can be addressed through incremental upgrades if and when they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing immediate cost savings against long-term operational efficiency and potential regulatory compliance risks. The decision-maker must move beyond a purely financial perspective to consider the broader implications of infrastructure choices on service delivery, security, and future scalability. The pressure to reduce upfront expenditure can lead to overlooking critical factors that impact the total cost of ownership and the ability to meet evolving business and regulatory demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a holistic evaluation that aligns with the principles of responsible technology investment and robust video infrastructure implementation. This involves considering not only the initial capital expenditure, but also ongoing operational costs, maintenance, security vulnerabilities, and the potential for future expansion or integration. Adhering to established industry best practices and relevant regulatory guidelines, e.g., those pertaining to data privacy, security, and service availability, if applicable within the exam-specified jurisdiction, ensures that the chosen solution is not only cost-effective in the short term, but also sustainable, secure, and compliant in the long term. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of costly retrofits, security breaches, or non-compliance penalties. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lowest upfront cost fails to account for the total cost of ownership. This can lead to higher maintenance expenses, increased downtime, and the need for premature replacement, ultimately proving more expensive. Ethically, it can also represent a failure to adequately protect organizational assets and data if the cheaper solution compromises security. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes a vendor with a less established track record or limited support infrastructure, even if initially cheaper, introduces significant operational risks. This can result in prolonged downtime, difficulty in obtaining timely support, and potential security vulnerabilities due to unpatched systems. This approach can be seen as professionally negligent, as it jeopardizes the reliability and security of the video infrastructure, potentially impacting business operations and compliance. A third incorrect approach that ignores the scalability and future integration needs of the organization. Opting for a solution that meets current needs but cannot adapt to future growth creates a significant long-term cost burden. This leads to expensive upgrades or complete replacements down the line, negating any initial cost savings. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of strategic foresight and can hinder the organization's ability to leverage technology for future competitive advantage. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured framework that includes defining clear project objectives and requirements, identifying all potential solutions, conducting a comprehensive total cost of ownership analysis for each solution, assessing risks, operational, security, compliance, evaluating vendor reliability and support, and considering future scalability and integration needs. This multifaceted approach ensures that decisions are informed, strategic, and aligned with both immediate and long-term organizational goals and regulatory obligations. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a project team is tasked with implementing a new video infrastructure solution. They have received proposals from several vendors, each offering different technologies and pricing structures. The project deadline is approaching, and there is significant pressure to make a decision quickly. The team is considering various approaches to select the most suitable vendor and solution. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for decision-making and technology implementation, ensuring both timely delivery and long-term viability? Option A. Rely primarily on the recommendations of the primary vendor's sales representatives, as they are considered experts in their own product offerings. Option B. Prioritize the solution that offers the most advanced features and the lowest upfront cost, assuming the vendor's claims are accurate and the technology will be easily integrated. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive evaluation of each vendor's proposal against a predefined set of technical, operational, security, and compliance requirements, including a thorough assessment of total cost of ownership and potential risks. Option D. Select the vendor that has the strongest existing relationship with the organization, even if their proposed solution is not the most technically advanced or cost-effective. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the solution that offers the most advanced features and the lowest upfront cost, assuming the vendor's claims are accurate and the technology will be easily integrated. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new video infrastructure and the need for rigorous adherence to established decision-making frameworks. The pressure to deliver a functional system quickly can lead to shortcuts in evaluation, potentially compromising long-term stability, security, and compliance. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically evaluates potential solutions against predefined criteria, ensuring that the chosen implementation aligns with organizational objectives and regulatory requirements. This structured decision-making process, often guided by frameworks like those found in IT governance standards and best practices for infrastructure implementation, promotes transparency, accountability, and risk mitigation. It ensures that all relevant factors, including scalability, security, cost-effectiveness, and compliance with relevant regulations, e.g., data privacy laws if applicable to the video content, or specific industry standards for infrastructure, are considered before a commitment is made. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in technology adoption, an incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings over long-term operational efficiency would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of foresight and a disregard for the total cost of ownership, which includes maintenance, upgrades, and potential downtime. It could also lead to non-compliance if the cheaper solution does not meet specific performance or security standards mandated by regulations or industry best practices. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on the vendor's recommendation without independent verification is professionally unsound. This represents a failure to exercise independent professional judgment and due diligence. It exposes the organization to risks associated with vendor lock-in, potential misrepresentation of capabilities, or solutions that are not optimally suited to the specific environment. This approach neglects the responsibility to thoroughly vet technology choices. A third incorrect approach that focuses exclusively on the latest technological features without considering integration complexity or operational impact is also professionally flawed. While innovation is important, a pragmatic implementation requires assessing how new technologies fit within the existing ecosystem and the practicalities of their deployment and ongoing management. This can lead to integration nightmares, increased training burdens, and a system that is difficult to maintain, ultimately hindering the intended benefits of the video infrastructure. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that typically involves 1. Defining clear objectives and requirements for the video infrastructure. 2. Identifying and evaluating potential solutions based on a predefined set of criteria, e.g., functionality, performance, security, scalability, cost, vendor support, compliance. 3. Conducting thorough risk assessments for each viable option. 4. Performing pilot testing or proof-of-concept evaluations where appropriate. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen solution. 6. Obtaining necessary approvals and ensuring alignment with organizational policies and regulatory mandates. Question 10. Process analysis reveals that a critical video infrastructure deployment is facing a tight deadline, and a proposed configuration deviates from standard security hardening guidelines due to time constraints. The project manager is considering proceeding with the non-compliant configuration, arguing that the risk is minimal and the delay to implement the correct security measures would jeopardize the project's go-live date. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement the non-compliant configuration and plan to address the security deviations in a future patch or update, prioritizing immediate functionality. Option B. Proceed with the non-compliant configuration to meet the deadline, assuming the risk is acceptable and relying on the vendor's security claims. Option C. Escalate the deviation to the security and compliance teams for a formal risk assessment and approval, even if it causes a minor delay, to ensure adherence to security best practices and regulatory requirements. Option D. Inform the project sponsor of the security concerns and request an extension to implement the correct security measures, highlighting the potential long-term risks of non-compliance. The correct answer is C. Escalate the deviation to the security and compliance teams for a formal risk assessment and approval, even if it causes a minor delay, to ensure adherence to security best practices and regulatory requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a functional video infrastructure with the long-term implications of security vulnerabilities and potential non-compliance with industry standards. The decision-maker must navigate the pressure to deliver a project on time and within budget while upholding ethical responsibilities and adhering to the regulatory framework governing video infrastructure implementation. The core of the challenge lies in assessing risk versus reward and understanding that a seemingly minor shortcut can have significant repercussions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and adherence to established security protocols. By engaging with the security team and seeking their approval for any deviations, the professional demonstrates a commitment to a secure and compliant implementation. This aligns with the principles of responsible technology deployment, ensuring that the video infrastructure is not only functional, but also protected against potential threats. This proactive engagement with security stakeholders is a cornerstone of robust IT governance and risk management, directly addressing the implicit requirements of maintaining a secure and reliable system, as expected by regulatory bodies and industry best practices. An incorrect approach that bypasses security review for expediency is professionally unacceptable due to several regulatory and ethical failures. Firstly, it violates the principle of due diligence, which mandates that professionals take reasonable steps to identify and mitigate risks. Ignoring security concerns can lead to breaches, data loss, and reputational damage, all of which can have legal and financial consequences. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the organization's security posture and the trust placed in the professional to implement systems responsibly. Furthermore, such an approach could contravene specific regulations related to data protection and cybersecurity, depending on the nature of the video data being transmitted and stored. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on vendor assurances without independent verification is also flawed. While vendors are expected to provide secure solutions, their primary objective is sales. A professional has an ethical and regulatory obligation to perform their own due diligence and ensure that the implemented solution meets the organization's specific security requirements and complies with all applicable laws. Blindly trusting a vendor can lead to the adoption of insecure configurations or the overlooking of critical vulnerabilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the project objectives and constraints. Second, Identify all relevant stakeholders, including security, compliance, and end users. Third, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, considering technical, security, and compliance aspects. Fourth, explore all viable implementation options, evaluating their pros and cons against the defined objectives and risk assessment. Fifth, consult with relevant experts and stakeholders to validate the chosen approach. Finally, document the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen implementation strategy, ensuring transparency and accountability. This systematic process helps to ensure that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and regulatory requirements. Question 11. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to implementing new video infrastructure, particularly when faced with tight deadlines and pressure to deliver quickly. Considering the potential for security vulnerabilities and regulatory noncompliance, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for video infrastructure implementation? Option A. Proceed with the implementation immediately, prioritizing speed of deployment over any security considerations to meet the deadline. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, identify potential vulnerabilities, and implement appropriate security controls that align with regulatory requirements, even if it introduces a minor delay. Option C. Implement the infrastructure without a formal risk assessment or security review, assuming the vendor's default settings are adequate. Option D. Implement the infrastructure without a formal risk assessment and security review, despite the potential for vulnerabilities, as the data is not considered highly sensitive. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the implementation immediately, prioritizing speed of deployment over any security considerations to meet the deadline. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for rapid deployment of new video infrastructure with the imperative to adhere to established security protocols and regulatory compliance. The pressure to deliver a functional system quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise security and potentially violate data privacy regulations. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks proactively, rather than reactively, ensuring that the implementation aligns with both business objectives and legal/ethical obligations. Careful judgment is required to assess the trade-offs between speed, cost, and security, ensuring that the chosen path is sustainable and defensible. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and the implementation of security controls that are commensurate with the identified risks, even if it introduces a slight delay. This aligns with the principles of security by design and privacy by design, which are fundamental to many regulatory frameworks governing data handling and infrastructure deployment. Specifically, it demonstrates adherence to the principle of proportionality, ensuring that security measures are proportionate to the potential harm. By integrating security and compliance considerations from the outset, the organization avoids costly remediation efforts later and maintains stakeholder trust. This proactive stance is a hallmark of best professional practice, as it prioritizes long-term integrity and compliance over short-term expediency. It also reflects a commitment to due diligence, a key ethical and often legal requirement. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the infrastructure without a formal risk assessment and security review, despite the potential for vulnerabilities, represents a failure to exercise due diligence. This approach disregards the potential for data breaches, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with data protection laws, which could lead to significant financial penalties and reputational damage. It also violates the ethical obligation to protect sensitive information. Prioritizing speed of deployment over any security considerations, even for non-sensitive data, is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. While efficiency is important, it cannot come at the expense of fundamental security principles. This approach demonstrates a disregard for the potential impact of security lapses, even on seemingly innocuous data, as it can serve as an entry point for more sophisticated attacks. It also fails to uphold the principle of accountability for data security. Accepting the vendor's default security settings without independent verification, even if they claim to be compliant, is another significant failure. Vendors may have varying interpretations of compliance, and their default settings might not align with the specific regulatory requirements or the organization's risk appetite. This approach abdicates responsibility for ensuring compliance and security, which is a direct violation of professional duty and regulatory mandates. It also overlooks the potential for vendor-specific vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to infrastructure implementation. This involves 1. Identifying all potential threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the video infrastructure and the data it will handle. 2. Assessing the likelihood and impact of these threats materializing. 3. Determining appropriate security controls to mitigate identified risks to an acceptable level. 4. Ensuring that all implemented controls comply with relevant regulations and industry best practices. 5. Documenting the entire process, including risk assessments, control implementations, and any deviations from standard procedures, for audit and accountability purposes. This structured decision-making process ensures that security and compliance are integral to the implementation, rather than an afterthought, fostering a culture of responsible technology deployment. Question 12. Market research demonstrates a growing demand for enhanced video collaboration tools among clients. A financial services firm is considering implementing a new, cutting-edge video conferencing solution to improve client engagement and internal communication. The proposed solution offers advanced features, but requires integration with existing cloud storage for recording client meetings. The project team is eager to deploy the solution rapidly to capitalize on market trends. Which of the following approaches best balances the firm's business objectives with its regulatory obligations concerning client data and communication privacy? Option A. Prioritize rapid deployment of the new video conferencing solution, focusing on feature set and cost effectiveness, with a plan to address security and compliance concerns post-implementation as they arise. Option B. Select the video conferencing solution with the most advanced features, assuming that a reputable vendor will inherently meet all necessary regulatory requirements without further investigation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed video conferencing solution, including its security features, data handling practices, and compliance with relevant data protection and financial services regulations before proceeding with deployment. Option D. Implement the video conferencing solution using the firm's existing, unvetted cloud storage for recordings, as this minimizes integration complexity and deployment time. The correct answer is A. Prioritize rapid deployment of the new video conferencing solution, focusing on feature set and cost effectiveness, with a plan to address security and compliance concerns post-implementation as they arise. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid technological adoption and the need for robust, compliant video infrastructure. The firm is under pressure to deploy new video conferencing capabilities quickly to maintain competitive advantage. But this haste risks overlooking critical security and data privacy considerations mandated by regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to balance business needs with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, risk-based implementation that aligns with established cybersecurity principles and data protection regulations. By conducting a thorough risk assessment, defining clear security requirements, and ensuring compliance with relevant data privacy laws, such as GDPR if the jurisdiction were specified as UK/EU, or similar US federal/state laws if US. The firm safeguards sensitive information, maintains customer trust, and avoids potential regulatory penalties. This proactive stance ensures that the video infrastructure is not only functional, but also secure and compliant from its inception. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on speed and cost-effectiveness without adequate security vetting would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to data breaches, unauthorized access to confidential communications, and non-compliance with data protection laws, resulting in substantial fines, reputational damage, and loss of client confidence. Another incorrect approach that neglects to consider the data residency requirements for video recordings or participant information would also be a failure, potentially violating laws that dictate where and how certain types of data can be stored and processed. Furthermore, an approach that bypasses necessary vendor due diligence, failing to assess the security posture of third-party video platforms, exposes the firm to risks associated with the vendor's own vulnerabilities, which is a breach of professional responsibility and potentially regulatory noncompliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the business objective, followed by a comprehensive identification of all applicable regulatory requirements. This should then lead to a risk assessment of potential implementation strategies, prioritizing solutions that demonstrably meet both business needs and compliance mandates. Continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment of the infrastructure's security and compliance posture are also crucial components of responsible management. Question 13. Operational review demonstrates a proposal to implement a new video surveillance system for public area traffic monitoring. The system is intended to collect video feeds to analyze traffic flow patterns and identify congestion points. While the primary purpose is traffic management, the system will inevitably capture images of individuals present in the public areas. What is the most appropriate initial step to ensure compliance with data protection regulations before proceeding with the implementation? Option A. Conduct a Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the collection and processing of personal data within the video feeds. Option B. Proceed with the implementation and address any data privacy concerns that arise after the system is operational. Option C. Focus solely on the technical specifications and functionality of the video system, assuming that public area footage does not constitute personal data. Option D. Implement the system with a general understanding of privacy principles and rely on existing organizational policies for data handling. The correct answer is A. Conduct a Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the collection and processing of personal data within the video feeds. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for efficient video infrastructure deployment with the stringent requirements of data privacy and security regulations. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the implementation of new video surveillance systems, even for seemingly benign purposes like traffic monitoring, adheres to all applicable legal frameworks concerning the collection, storage, and processing of personal data. Professionals must navigate the complexities of identifying what constitutes personal data within video feeds, understanding consent requirements, and implementing appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect this data. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of public trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive assessment of the proposed video infrastructure against relevant data protection laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if the jurisdiction is the UK/EU. This includes conducting a Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) to identify and mitigate privacy risks before implementation. It necessitates understanding the lawful basis for processing personal data, e.g., legitimate interests, consent, ensuring data minimization principles are applied, collecting only what is necessary, and establishing robust security measures for data storage and access. This approach aligns with the principles of privacy by design and privacy by default, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance and ethical data handling. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible innovation and safeguarding individual rights. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the video infrastructure without a prior privacy impact assessment and without clearly defining the lawful basis for data processing is a significant regulatory failure. This approach risks collecting and processing personal data unlawfully, violating principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. It also fails to implement adequate security measures, potentially exposing sensitive data to breaches. Deploying the system with a general understanding of privacy, but without specific technical controls for anonymization or pseudonymization where appropriate, and without a clear data retention policy, also constitutes a regulatory failure. This can lead to the unnecessary retention of personal data, increasing the risk of misuse and noncompliance with storage limitation principles. Focusing solely on the technical functionality of the video infrastructure without considering the data privacy implications, such as how the data will be accessed, shared, and secured, is a critical ethical and regulatory oversight. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the fundamental rights of individuals whose data might be captured. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing compliance with data protection regulations from the outset. This involves 1. Identifying all potential personal data that will be collected or processed by the video infrastructure. 2. Determining the lawful basis for processing this data, 3. Conducting a DPIA to assess and mitigate privacy risks. 4. Implementing technical and organizational measures to ensure data security, minimization, and appropriate retention. 5. Establishing clear policies and procedures for data handling, access, and incident response. 6. Seeking legal and expert advice when uncertainties arise regarding regulatory interpretation. This systematic process ensures that technological advancements are implemented responsibly and ethically, safeguarding both the organization and the individuals whose data is involved. Question 14. Assessment of the most appropriate strategy for integrating a new video surveillance system into an existing corporate network, considering the need to comply with U.S. data privacy regulations and cybersecurity best practices when the system will capture employee activity in common areas. Option A. Prioritize the lowest-cost hardware and software solutions to minimize initial investment and deploy the system as quickly as possible to address immediate security concerns, deferring detailed privacy and security policy development to a later stage. Option B. Implement the video surveillance system with robust encryption for data transmission and storage, establish strict access controls based on the principle of least privilege, and develop clear data retention and deletion policies aligned with legal requirements and business needs. Option C. Focus on maximizing the resolution and frame rate of the video capture to ensure the highest quality footage, and implement minimal access controls to allow broad access for security personnel to review footage at their discretion. Option D. Deploy the video surveillance system without extensive data encryption, relying primarily on network perimeter security, and adopt a policy of indefinite data retention to ensure all historical footage is available for any future investigation. The correct answer is B. Implement the video surveillance system with robust encryption for data transmission and storage, establish strict access controls based on the principle of least privilege, and develop clear data retention and deletion policies aligned with legal requirements and business needs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to balance the immediate operational requirements of a video infrastructure implementation with the long-term implications of data privacy and security, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive video data. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant regulatory framework, which in this context is assumed to be the U.S. framework, specifically focusing on data privacy regulations like HIPAA, if health-related video is involved, or general data protection principles under frameworks like the FTC Act and cybersecurity best practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance without unduly hindering project progress. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment and the implementation of robust security measures aligned with regulatory mandates. This involves understanding the specific types of data being captured, the potential vulnerabilities of the chosen video infrastructure, and the legal obligations regarding data storage, access, and retention. Adhering to principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and secure by design is paramount. This proactive stance ensures that privacy and security are integrated from the outset, mitigating legal risks, building trust with stakeholders, and preventing potential data breaches. It aligns with the ethical responsibility to protect sensitive information. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost-effectiveness without adequate consideration for data security would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for regulatory requirements that mandate appropriate safeguards for sensitive data. Such an approach could lead to significant fines, legal liabilities, and reputational damage if a data breach occurs. Another incorrect approach that neglects to establish clear data retention and deletion policies would also be a regulatory and ethical failure. This oversight violates principles of data minimization and can lead to the unnecessary storage of sensitive information, increasing the risk surface and potentially contravening data protection laws that require data to be kept only for as long as necessary. A third incorrect approach that bypasses necessary security audits and compliance checks in favor of rapid deployment would be a direct violation of due diligence requirements and a failure to uphold professional standards for implementing secure systems. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify and understand all applicable regulations and legal obligations related to the data being handled. 2. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the proposed video infrastructure, identifying potential vulnerabilities and threats to data privacy and security. 3. Design and implement security controls that are proportionate to the identified risks and compliant with regulatory requirements. 4. Establish clear policies and procedures for data handling, including access controls, encryption, retention, and deletion. 5. Ensure ongoing monitoring, auditing, and review of the implemented infrastructure and policies to maintain compliance and adapt to evolving threats. 6. Seek legal and expert advice when uncertainties arise regarding regulatory interpretation or technical implementation. Question 15. Comparative studies suggest that the integration of advanced video analytics into new infrastructure projects often outpaces the development of robust data privacy protocols. A project manager is tasked with implementing a new video surveillance system that will capture and analyze footage for security purposes. The system is expected to be operational within 3 months to meet urgent security needs. The project manager is considering several approaches to ensure compliance with data protection regulations. Which approach best balances the urgent need for deployment with the imperative of regulatory adherence? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify potential privacy risks and implement necessary safeguards before full system deployment, consulting with legal and compliance teams throughout the process. Option B. Implement the system with minimal security measures to ensure a quick rollout, assuming that any privacy issues can be resolved through software updates at a later date. Option C. Rely on the vendor's default privacy settings for the video surveillance system, assuming they are compliant with all relevant regulations without further verification. Option D. Prioritize the rapid deployment of the video surveillance system using standard security configurations and address any potential data privacy concerns in a post-implementation review. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to identify potential privacy risks and implement necessary safeguards before full system deployment, consulting with legal and compliance teams throughout the process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new video infrastructure and the stringent regulatory requirements for data privacy and security. The pressure to deliver a functional system quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise compliance. The professional must balance technical feasibility with legal obligations, ensuring that the implementation adheres to all applicable regulations without undue delay. This requires a proactive approach to understanding and integrating compliance measures from the outset, rather than treating them as an afterthought. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and the implementation of appropriate security controls that are aligned with the specific data being processed and stored by the video infrastructure. This aligns with the principles of data protection by design and by default, as mandated by regulations like GDPR, if the jurisdiction were specified as EU. It ensures that privacy and security are embedded into the system's architecture from the initial stages. By consulting with legal and compliance teams, the professional demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to regulatory adherence, minimizing the risk of breaches and subsequent penalties. This proactive engagement is crucial for building trust and ensuring the long-term viability of the video infrastructure. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed of deployment over comprehensive security and privacy measures. This directly violates the principle of data protection by design and by default. It creates a significant risk of data breaches, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with data handling regulations, potentially leading to severe financial penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to assume that standard, off-the-shelf security solutions are sufficient without a specific assessment of the video infrastructure's data processing activities. This overlooks the unique risks associated with video data, which can include sensitive personal information. Without a tailored approach, critical vulnerabilities may remain unaddressed, leading to non-compliance. A third incorrect approach is to defer all compliance considerations to a later stage, after the infrastructure is operational. This reactive stance is inherently risky. It increases the likelihood of discovering significant compliance gaps that require costly and time-consuming remediation, potentially disrupting operations and exposing the organization to regulatory scrutiny during the interim period. Professional reasoning. Professionals in video infrastructure implementation must adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. The decision-making process should begin with a comprehensive understanding of the data to be handled, the relevant regulatory landscape and potential threats. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulations and guidelines. 2. Conducting a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) to understand the risks associated with processing personal data. 3. Designing the infrastructure with privacy and security controls integrated from the conceptual stage, privacy by design. 4. Implementing robust security measures, including encryption, access controls, and audit logging, proportionate to the identified risks. 5. Establishing clear data retention and deletion policies. 6. Engaging legal and compliance experts throughout the project lifecycle. 7. Regularly reviewing and updating security and privacy measures as threats and regulations evolve. Question 16. The control framework reveals a critical requirement to upgrade the organization's video conferencing infrastructure to support increased remote work demands. While a vendor has been identified that offers a feature-rich solution at a competitive price, concerns have been raised regarding the vendor's data handling practices and their compliance with the jurisdiction's specific data privacy regulations. The project timeline is aggressive, with significant pressure to deploy the new system within the next quarter. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure both operational efficiency and regulatory adherence? Option A. Select an alternative vendor whose data handling practices are fully transparent and demonstrably compliant with all local data privacy regulations, even if it means a slight delay in deployment. Option B. Prioritize immediate deployment of the chosen vendor's solution to meet the aggressive timeline, deferring detailed data privacy compliance checks to a later post-implementation phase. Option C. Implement the chosen vendor solution without extensive vendor vetting, relying on the organization's internal security team to implement additional safeguards post-deployment. Option D. Proceed with the vendor's solution after conducting a targeted security review focused on encryption and data residency, and implement a phased rollout with ongoing monitoring. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the vendor's solution after conducting a targeted security review focused on encryption and data residency, and implement a phased rollout with ongoing monitoring. Explanation. The control framework reveals a critical juncture in implementing a new video infrastructure solution. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for enhanced video conferencing capabilities with the long-term implications of data security and compliance. Specifically, the scenario demands a deep understanding of how to integrate new technologies while adhering to the stringent data privacy regulations applicable to the specified jurisdiction. The professional challenge is to avoid a reactive, quick-fix approach that could lead to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment and a phased implementation strategy that includes robust security controls and thorough testing. This aligns with best professional practice by demonstrating due diligence, a proactive stance on data protection, and a commitment to regulatory compliance. It ensures that the video infrastructure not only meets functional requirements, but also safeguards sensitive information, thereby upholding client trust and avoiding potential breaches of data privacy laws. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid deployment without adequate security vetting would fail to meet the jurisdiction's data protection mandates. This could involve overlooking the need for end-to-end encryption or failing to ensure that data storage complies with residency requirements, leading to direct regulatory violations. Another incorrect approach, such as selecting a vendor based solely on cost without a thorough security audit, ignores the critical responsibility to protect client data, potentially violating contractual obligations and data protection legislation. A third incorrect approach, which involves bypassing established change management protocols for speed, risks introducing vulnerabilities and operational instability, and directly impacting security and compliance by creating an environment where breaches are more likely. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable data protection laws and guidelines. Next, a thorough risk assessment should be conducted, evaluating potential threats to data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This assessment should inform the selection of technologies and vendors, prioritizing those with proven security credentials and compliance certifications. Finally, a phased implementation plan with clear testing and validation stages, overseen by a robust change management process, ensures that the new infrastructure is secure, compliant, and effectively integrated. Question 17. To address the challenge of rapidly deploying a new video streaming service while ensuring strict adherence to data privacy regulations, what is the most prudent approach for the implementation team? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security impact assessment, including thorough vendor due diligence and the establishment of clear data handling policies, before proceeding with full-scale implementation. Option B. Implement the service, and then address any identified security or privacy concerns on a reactive basis as they arise. Option C. Proceed with the implementation of the new video streaming service immediately, relying on the assumption that standard IT security protocols will adequately protect user data. Option D. Prioritize speed of deployment by accepting vendor-provided compliance certifications without independent verification. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive data privacy and security impact assessment, including thorough vendor due diligence and the establishment of clear data handling policies, before proceeding with full-scale implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid technological deployment and the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance in video infrastructure. The pressure to implement new video streaming solutions quickly can lead to overlooking critical security and privacy considerations, which are paramount under the specified regulatory framework. Ensuring that all components, from ingest to playback, adhere to data protection laws and industry best practices requires meticulous planning and ongoing vigilance. The complexity of modern video pipelines, involving multiple vendors, cloud services, and diverse user endpoints, amplifies the risk of noncompliance if not managed proactively. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment and a phased implementation strategy that prioritizes security and privacy by design. This aligns with the core principles of the specified regulatory framework, which mandates that data protection measures are integrated into the design of systems and services from the outset. By conducting thorough vendor due diligence, ensuring data encryption at rest and in transit, and establishing clear data retention and access control policies, the organization proactively mitigates potential compliance breaches. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible data handling and builds trust with users and regulators. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing new video streaming solutions without a formal security and privacy impact assessment before deployment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses a fundamental requirement of the specified framework, which necessitates understanding and mitigating risks to personal data. Relying solely on vendor assurances regarding compliance without independent verification or contractual obligations is also a failure. Vendors may have varying interpretations of regulations or may not have implemented adequate controls, leaving the organization exposed. Furthermore, assuming that standard IT security measures are sufficient for video infrastructure, without considering the unique data types and transmission methods involved, overlooks specific regulatory nuances and potential vulnerabilities inherent in video data. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive, risk-based approach to implementing video infrastructure. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory obligations applicable to the data being processed and transmitted. 2. Conducting thorough due diligence on all technology vendors and partners. 3. Integrating security and privacy considerations into the design and architecture from the earliest stages. 4. Implementing robust technical and organizational measures to protect data throughout its lifecycle. 5. Establishing clear policies and procedures for data handling, access, and retention. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating compliance measures in response to evolving threats and regulatory changes. This systematic process ensures that technological advancements are pursued responsibly, minimizing legal, financial, and reputational risks. Question 18. The assessment process reveals that a proposed video infrastructure implementation for a financial institution's client interaction monitoring system may capture sensitive client data. The institution operates under a strict regulatory framework that mandates specific data retention periods, robust access controls, and data minimization principles for all captured information. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with these regulatory requirements? Option A. Focus primarily on the cost-effectiveness and ease of integration of the video infrastructure, with a plan to address regulatory compliance issues retrospectively if they arise. Option B. Prioritize selecting video infrastructure components that offer configurable data retention policies aligned with regulatory mandates. Implement role-based access controls with strict audit trails, and ensure the system is designed to capture only the minimum necessary data for its stated purpose. Option C. Implement the video infrastructure with the most advanced recording capabilities available, assuming that higher quality footage will inherently satisfy any regulatory scrutiny regarding data content. Option D. Deploy the video infrastructure with default settings for data retention and access, and rely on general IT security best practices without specific validation against the financial institution's regulatory obligations. The correct answer is B. Prioritize selecting video infrastructure components that offer configurable data retention policies aligned with regulatory mandates. Implement role-based access controls with strict audit trails, and ensure the system is designed to capture only the minimum necessary data for its stated purpose. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the technical implementation of video infrastructure with the stringent regulatory requirements of data privacy and security, specifically concerning the handling of personally identifiable information, PI, captured by video systems. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen video infrastructure solution, while meeting functional needs, also adheres to the specified regulatory framework without introducing vulnerabilities or non-compliance risks. Careful judgment is required to select a solution that is both effective and legally sound. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding and explicit adherence to the regulatory framework governing video infrastructure and data handling. This involves proactively identifying all relevant regulations, assessing the proposed infrastructure against these requirements, and implementing controls to ensure compliance. This proactive and documented approach minimizes the risk of regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and legal liabilities. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical data stewardship and responsible technology deployment, aligning with the principles of data protection by design and by default. An incorrect approach that overlooks or misinterprets the regulatory framework for data retention periods is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of data protection laws, which mandate specific limits on how long PII can be stored. Such a failure can lead to significant fines, legal action, and a loss of trust from individuals whose data is compromised. Another incorrect approach that fails to implement adequate access controls and encryption for video data is also professionally unacceptable. This oversight creates significant security risks, making the captured PII vulnerable to unauthorized access, breaches, and misuse. This directly contravenes regulations that require organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data. A third incorrect approach that neglects to establish a clear data minimization policy for video capture is professionally unacceptable. This failure results in the collection and storage of more data than is necessary for the stated purpose, increasing the organization's data footprint and potential liability. Regulations typically emphasize collecting only the data that is strictly required, and failing to do so is a breach of these principles. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Identify and thoroughly understand all applicable regulatory frameworks relevant to the video infrastructure and the data it captures. 2. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, specifically evaluating how the proposed infrastructure might impact compliance with these regulations. 3. Prioritize solutions that inherently support compliance, such as those offering granular control over data retention, access, and encryption. 4. Document all compliance-related decisions, justifications, and implemented controls. 5. Seek legal and compliance expert review before final implementation. 6. Establish ongoing monitoring and auditing processes to ensure continued adherence to regulatory requirements. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates that a new video surveillance system is being deployed across multiple company sites to enhance security and monitor operational efficiency. The implementation team is focused on rapid deployment and has not yet conducted a formal privacy impact assessment, believing that the system is solely for internal security purposes and therefore exempt from extensive privacy scrutiny. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional best practices for this video infrastructure implementation? Option A. Deploy the system and assume that since it is for internal security, it does not collect or process personal data that would trigger privacy obligations. Option B. Implement the system with a disclaimer stating that all video data is for internal operational review only and therefore not subject to privacy regulations. Option C. Proceed with the rapid deployment as planned, relying on post-implementation audits to identify and address any privacy concerns that may arise. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive privacy impact assessment, PIA, before the full rollout of the video system, identifying all potential personal data capture, assessing risks, and implementing mitigation strategies. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive privacy impact assessment, PIA, before the full rollout of the video system, identifying all potential personal data capture, assessing risks, and implementing mitigation strategies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient video infrastructure implementation with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the collection and processing of video data, even for internal operational review, does not inadvertently capture personally identifiable information, PI, or sensitive data without proper consent or a legitimate legal basis. The rapid deployment of new systems often outpaces thorough privacy impact assessments, creating a risk of non-compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a proactive and comprehensive privacy impact assessment, PIA, before and during the implementation of new video infrastructure. This aligns with the principles of data protection by design and by default, as mandated by regulations like the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, if the jurisdiction were specified as the EU or similar frameworks in other jurisdictions. A PIA systematically identifies potential privacy risks associated with the processing of personal data, evaluates the necessity and proportionality of the data processing, and outlines measures to mitigate identified risks. This ensures that the video infrastructure is designed and implemented in a manner that respects individual privacy rights from the outset, thereby preventing potential breaches and regulatory penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical data handling and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing video infrastructure without a prior or concurrent PIA is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of accountability, as the organization cannot demonstrate that it has taken appropriate measures to comply with data protection obligations. This approach risks the unauthorized collection and processing of personal data, leading to potential breaches of privacy and trust. Furthermore, it fails to adhere to the data protection by design and by default principle, which requires privacy considerations to be integrated into the development of new technologies and systems. Relying solely on post-implementation audits is reactive and insufficient. It may identify problems but does not prevent them from occurring in the first place, potentially exposing the organization to substantial fines and reputational damage. Similarly, assuming that internal operational review exempts the organization from privacy obligations is a dangerous misconception. Even internal data processing can involve personal data, and regulations typically apply to all forms of data processing, regardless of the purpose. Unless specific exemptions are clearly met and documented. Professional reasoning. Professionals in video infrastructure implementation must adopt a risk-based approach to regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the specific data protection laws applicable to their operating jurisdiction. The decision-making process should begin with identifying all potential personal data that the video infrastructure might capture. Subsequently, a thorough risk assessment, often formalized as a PIA, should be conducted to evaluate the likelihood and impact of privacy risks. Based on this assessment, appropriate technical and organizational measures should be implemented to mitigate these risks. Continuous monitoring and periodic reviews are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance as the infrastructure evolves and usage patterns change. Ethical considerations demand that privacy is not an afterthought, but an integral part of the design and deployment process. Question 20. Compliance review shows that a new video infrastructure implementation project is underway, intended to enhance physical security across multiple company sites. The project team is eager to deploy the technology rapidly to address perceived security vulnerabilities. What is the most appropriate regulatory compliance approach to ensure adherence to data protection principles before the infrastructure is fully operational? Option A. Rely on the security-focused nature of the video system to exempt it from detailed data protection scrutiny, as its primary purpose is not personal data processing. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the video data processing. Option C. Proceed with the implementation and address any privacy concerns that arise during or after the deployment phase. Option D. Obtain broad consent from all individuals who may be captured by the video surveillance systems, assuming this covers all regulatory requirements. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to identify and mitigate potential privacy risks associated with the video data processing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient video infrastructure deployment with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the implementation of new video systems, which inherently capture and process personal data, adheres strictly to the specified regulatory framework without compromising operational objectives. Professionals must navigate the complexities of data minimization, purpose limitation, and consent management within the context of a rapidly evolving technological landscape. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough data protection impact assessment, DPIA, before any implementation begins. This aligns directly with regulatory mandates that require proactive identification and mitigation of privacy risks associated with new technologies that process personal data. A DPIA ensures that the principles of data protection by design and by default are embedded into the project from its inception. This approach demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance, ethical data handling, and building trust with individuals whose data may be processed. It allows for informed decision-making regarding the necessity, proportionality, and security of the video infrastructure, thereby minimizing the likelihood of future regulatory breaches and associated penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the implementation based on the assumption that the video system is solely for security purposes, thereby bypassing a formal DPIA. This fails to acknowledge that even security footage can constitute personal data, and that regulatory frameworks often require a DPIA for any processing likely to result in a high risk to individuals' rights and freedoms, regardless of the stated primary purpose. This approach risks violating principles of data minimization and purpose limitation if the data collected exceeds what is strictly necessary for security. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on obtaining broad consent from individuals without a clear understanding of what data is being collected, how it will be used, and for how long it will be retained. This is insufficient because regulatory frameworks often require more than just consent. They mandate transparency, specific purposes, and the right to withdraw consent. Broad consent can be legally invalid if it is not freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. This approach also fails to address the technical and organizational measures required to protect the data. A third incorrect approach is to implement the video infrastructure and then attempt to retroactively address privacy concerns. This is a reactive rather than proactive stance and is fundamentally at odds with the principles of data protection by design and by default. Retroactive measures are often less effective, more costly, and may not fully rectify any initial noncompliance, potentially leading to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, starting with a comprehensive understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. Before any technical implementation, a thorough assessment of potential privacy impacts is paramount. This involves identifying the types of personal data to be processed, the purposes of processing, the legal basis for processing, and the potential risks to individuals. Engaging with legal and privacy experts early in the project lifecycle is crucial. Documenting all assessments, decisions, and mitigation strategies provides a clear audit trail and demonstrates due diligence. In situations of uncertainty, erring on the side of caution and seeking expert advice is always the most professional course of action.